Wonderful song and good job with that. Are you able to hear me okay with this mic right now? Are we? Okay, good. My daughter Annie is in El Paso, Texas, or somewhere down there. The word is she is working at the University of Texas, El Paso this summer, and she's doing some research for a professor down there very close to the Mexico border. And I was talking with her on the phone the other day. She had called, we were talking, and it was her second weekend down there. And of course, she's already been over, even though the professor said, whatever you do, don't cross the border, it's dangerous over there. Of course, Annie, being fluent in Spanish and having spent almost a year in Mexico herself, didn't heed that advice. Crossed over the border the first Friday she was there with a friend and went to a wedding, had a great party, a great time. Came back unscathed, of course. But she said, it's interesting when you go over there. She said it's a whole different way of doing things. And she knows this because she's lived there. And one of the things she told me was that whenever I said, what do you mean? She said, well, it takes forever for things to unfold, for things to happen. She said, and I get so frustrated. I said, how so? She said, for instance, we were planning to go to a movie at 7. We were planning to go out dancing after the movie at 9:30. And she said, but before that, we had to find a way to eat, and we were going to prepare dinner together. And so at 1 o'clock, we start in this process, she said, and one of us could go get the food, and one of us could, get the tickets for the film, and one of us could make sure that everything is set up for going dancing afterwards. She said, but instead of divvying out those responsibilities to different, and one person had to go over to the pharmacy and pick up some medication, and she said, rather than each person doing those things, it's like we all pile in together, the whole family, and we all go to the pharmacy, and then we all go to the grocery store and collect what we need, and then we all come back home and we all participate in cutting up the vegetables and for the salsa verde and for all the stuff that goes into making the feast, and then we all go out to the theater together, and then we all go dancing. She said, and so the frustration is that by the time we did all this, we didn't have time to do what we wanted to do. We didn't even get to the theater, much less to dancing. And so she was frustrated about that. And it's evident that we do different things in different ways in different cultures. The story that we get today and the story of Naaman, we have two cultures at work here with each other. These two countries, Aram, or as we know it today, Syria, and Israel, at the time in our story of Naaman, have had a tense sort of peace together for a number of years. And so in this story, the way this happens is, and you know the story well, I hope, I'll recap it for you just a bit. If you'll advance that slide, thank you. One more time, please. So who are the players in this story? Well, what happens, the way this unfolds, is that Naaman is a commander in the Aramean army. In fact, he's a great commander. He's very prosperous at this. Some people saw this as a sign of God's blessing on him. And he has leprosy though, which is a skin disease of some sort. The jury's still out on exactly what this was in biblical times. One person has said that it was probably related to mold and mildew. It was probably a topical sort of irritation. It could also get into clothes and into houses. It was also contagious. But suffice it to say that something was going on in Naaman about his appearance that he didn't like. And so a servant girl, maybe I should read that because that's important. Let me read through this scripture. It'll give you some idea of where we are. Naaman, the commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man in high favor with his master because by him God had given victory to Aram. The man, though a mighty warrior, suffered from leprosy. Now the Arameans, on one of their raids, had taken a young captive girl, a girl captive from the land of Israel. And she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria in Israel, he would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in and told the king, or his lord, just what the girl from the land of Israel had said. And the king of Aram said, "Well, go then. I'll send a letter along to the king of Israel." And so Naaman left, taking with him all kinds of gifts, great gifts, preceded him. This was customary. And he wanted to make a great impression because, after all, he was a great man. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches..." Now, this is from the king of Aram, right? He said, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you my servant Naaman, that you may cure him of his leprosy." And when the king of Israel heard this, how do you think he felt? Think that was a good thing? Positive thing? No. He was terrified. Why? He couldn't cure leprosy. Why are you sending this guy to me? Are you trying to pick a fight with me? He said. So, he tore his clothes. When the man of God, Elisha, heard this, don't know how he heard it, maybe word of mouth, this mysterious element of communication that happens in this story, the word comes to Elisha, the man of God, the prophet of God, and Elisha says, "Why have you torn your clothes? Send to him, tell him, why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, the man, that he may learn that there is a prophet in Israel." And so Naaman came with his horses and chariots and halted at the entrance of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to him saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored and you shall be clean." Well, at this, how do you think Naaman reacted? Not positively. In fact, he became irate. He became angry. I thought that for me, surely he would come out and stand and call on the name of the Lord God and would wave his hand over the spots on me and cure the leprosy. And are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, greater than all the rivers of Israel and Samaria? Could I not wash in them and be clean? And he turned and went away in a rage. But his servants approached him and said to him, "My Lord, if the prophet had commanded you to do something difficult, would you not have done it? How much more then, when all he said to you was wash? Wash and be clean." And so Naaman went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. His flesh was restored like that of a young man, and he was clean. Who are the players in this story? Who are the key players in this story? Whose names do you remember from this story?
The servant girl.
Oh, you already heard the story, Bobby. Who are the key players in the story, though? We think first off of who? Naaman, the king of Aram or Syria, the king of Israel, and yet, as Bobby rightly points out, the real key players, servant girl, who else?
Naaman's servant.
Naaman's servant? Elisha's servant, he sends out to Naaman. He also somehow gets word from the king of Israel that this is going on. So there's that element that's also key in this story. And these are the people that often tend to get overlooked. Not only in this story, but in our society. And not only in our society, but within our own selves. There was a song, I was going to show you a YouTube video, but this was one of those Sundays when glitches happen technologically. Talk about how powerful some little small things are when a computer won't start up and you can't get it to the place you need it to be, and that's my fault. I was going to show you a video. What I'm going to have to do is tell you the story. If you remember, many years ago, Chet Atkins sang a song. I think it was written by Ray Stevens. It was called Frog Kissing. You ever heard that song? It's the story of the Frog Prince. So I know you know the story of the Frog Prince, right? The story of the Frog Prince is that there is a prince that's been cursed by a wicked witch. And the curse is that this prince is now a frog. And along comes one day a princess who sees the frog. I don't remember all the story and how it happens, but I know what happens. And what happens is that she bends down and kisses the frog. And upon kissing the frog, what happens? The frog becomes the prince again. It's a story about paying attention to those things that we typically overlook. Both on the outside as well as on the inside. Those things can be the source of our greatest healing and happiness. The problem with Naaman was he hadn't figured this out yet. He had it all figured out before this. His expectations preceded him along with the garments that he sent. He had all these expectations because of who he was and how great he felt he was about how this should unfold and how his healing should happen. And he was blindsided because it didn't happen that way. Everything he expected, he had to throw out the window. What are those things that you ignore, that you overlook or discount on the inside of yourself, that just may be sources of your own healing? Now, Carl Jung referred to this as the shadow in ourselves. That part of ourselves that we neglect and don't want to look at, that may feel like an aberration to us. And yet, Jung points out it's in those very things. It's going into those places in ourselves, those dark places, and we all have it in us. That becomes the source of our healing. Naaman had a direction in his mind that he wanted to go with this. And this was the way it was. He was oblivious to anyone or anybody else around him who might be able to help. What are those things that we do this with? What are those little insignificant parts of your life that just may be packed with hidden meaning and truth and ultimately with healing? What are those little insignificant parts that have been neglected in your life? Or who are those people, those insignificant people in our community that have been neglected? In Greek mythology, if you'll go one more whit, a little more. In the dream world, a frog is a daimon. Daimon is a word from Greek mythology that means an attendant spirit, in other words, and also a genius, but also that which is somewhat magical and holds for us the healing that we need. Whenever the frog shows up in your dreams, anybody had a dream lately in which a frog showed up? That would be a really good dream. Because the presence of a frog from the dream in the dream world is the presence of what is necessary in your life for your healing. So the story we get about the Frog Prince is an archetypal story in that way. That those parts in our lives that we discount are the very things that hold our healing, both within ourselves and in our society. No one wants to kiss frogs. I don't know of anybody that likes doing that. And no one wants to be wrong either. Naaman didn't want to be wrong. No one seeks out the unlovely in themselves or in others. But Naaman did. And to his credit, even reluctantly, because of some insignificant or seemingly insignificant people in his life, he is able to see from a different perspective and to move in a direction of healing rather than anger and rage. To move in a direction of calm rather than in a direction of arrogance. Jesus does this too. What Naaman does reluctantly, Jesus does boldly. Jesus goes to the one who's the outcast, the oppressed. And in fact, the whole biblical story, as you look over the Hebrew Scriptures, the Christian Scriptures testify to this. The one of least significance becomes most significant. Or as Jesus put it, the first shall be last, the last shall be first. Inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, you did it to me. And the stories like Naaman and the muddy Jordan and foreign servants who couldn't possibly offer the privileged and powerful commander anything worth anything more than trouble. The success of God comes through in the immigrant farm worker or the homeless unemployed or the single parent. What healing for our society might these hold? What healing in our lives, what enrichment in our lives might these hold for us? If we slow down, turn around, bend down, and kiss us some frogs. Frogs who have been cursed. Not by a wicked witch in a fairy tale, but cursed by the powerful and prominent in our society and in our psyches. What jewel or pearl of great price might these offer to our souls for our healing? No one seeks these out as the answer to society's problems. In fact, what we do most often is label them as problems in society. But Jesus sought them out. Not as a problem, but as a solution. As very key to the kingdom of heaven. In fact, he said, if you don't become like one of these, you can't get there. You can't be in it. You can't experience it. And it was in them that he found the keys to the kingdom of heaven. So I have to ask, are we approaching things as Naaman did? This kingdom of heaven that Jesus spoke of is about a way of relating and including and valuing that which we and others have discounted, that which we reject is essential for our health. That which we reject both in ourselves and in our society, that which we discount in ourselves and our society are the frogs that are the key not only to that we must not only see as acceptable but as essential to not only our wholeness but our happiness both as individuals and as a society. This is evident both in the biblical witness of the Hebrew Scriptures and in the testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Both bear witness to the importance of the impoverished for the healing and wholeness of our society. What that means individually is that when we look inside ourselves and maybe we think we don't have anything to offer, we need to look again. Each of us, every one of us, even the frogs among us, and we're all frogs in this sense, have gifts. And not just any gifts, not just dime store gifts, but wonderfully exquisite, transformative gifts to offer in this church, in our community, and in our world. What Annie has come to appreciate about the culture of Mexico is that we do things together there. And that in that, children learn how we do things. They're there for all of life. We so much in the West and in the Northern Hemisphere tend to keep our children away from the pain and the suffering. We tend to keep them out of the process. Think about our lifestyles by comparison. We're so individualistic here. We're so like Naaman. We so get caught up into, oh, this is the way I've got to do this. Another culture, people from another culture offer us a different way to look at that. Offer us the possibility of being able to see things and imagine new possibilities for solutions. Not unlike this story, this ancient story from the Hebrew Scriptures, where one culture learns from another culture, where the foreigner among the Syrians, this foreign immigrant servant girl, holds the key to the healing of her nation, of her commander, of her Lord. In this communion meal that we share together, very simple elements remind us that little things can carry great meaning in our lives, can carry the very healing we so incessantly seek. It serves as a reminder also, as we take this broken bread, this brokenness in our hands and dip it in the cup and put it in our mouths, that even the darkest shadow we cast gives way to light. That even this brokenness becomes healing. Amen. Our hymn is inserted in